I'm going to discuss what is it all about. So first is the core subject description. So the subject covers various contemporary arts practices of the region where the school is located. It aims to provide students with an appreciation of a broad range of styles in the various disciplines with consideration on their elements and principles, and engage them to an integrative approach in studying arts. So through this subject, the students will broaden and acquire the necessary creative tools that open opportunities in pursuing their goals and aspirations. Next, in this subject, we have 4 contents and 4 performance standards. So first is the content. Number 1, integrative art as applied to contemporary art. The second is contemporary arts in the Philippines. The third one is the different contemporary art techniques and performance practices. And the last one is the contemporary arts production. Now is the performance standard. First, the learner will present a form of integrated contemporary art based on the region of his or her choice. The second is the students will create avenues to advocate the arts from the different regions. The third one is the student will discriminate among various materials and techniques. And the last performance standard is they're going to design a production using available materials and appropriate techniques. So that's all. Goodbye.
When we hear that word, some of our minds jump to museums or framed paintings, and in that context, some people think, nah, I'm not a big fan of art, I just don't get it. Or they think of art as something that's just for intellectuals or artsy people. But really, art is for anyone who wants to experience it, and it's often in more places than we might realize. Songs you like, movies you watch, poems, theater, even a quilt that your grandmother made. All of that and more is art. So you might be wondering, well, then what is art? How do I define it? Well, that's tough. Art's been around for thousands of years, and through the ages it's evolved in a number of different ways. And the reasons for creating it vary from person to person depending on any number of factors. So defining art is pretty tricky, and it's something that's been debated throughout history. There just isn't one agreed upon definition. However, many believe that art is anything that stirs emotion in you. Now, the emotions that get stirred up depend entirely on your own history, your story, everything that comes together to make up who you are. And because of this, 3 different people can experience the same piece of art and have wildly different reactions to it. One person might think it's the most beautiful thing they've ever seen, the second person might hate it, and the third might not feel much of anything at all. And none of them would be wrong. Everyone's entitled to their own preferences and feelings when it comes to art. You know, the way you feel about your favorite song could be the same way that someone else feels about their favorite sculpture. And even though you might not like that sculpture, it can be valuable to consider why that person enjoys it so much. You may learn something about them and maybe even yourself. The term art is really just a label. Over the years, a lot of people have tried to classify what it is or what it isn't, but that's not really what art is about. It's about your personal experience with it and the meaning that you draw from it. Everyone reacts to art differently and has the potential to grow and learn from it. It gives us the opportunity to tell stories, record history, and tap into our emotions in a way that few other things can.
Subject matter is a formal term used to categorize 2- and 3-dimensional art. We use these terms: representational from the natural world, representational from the imaginative world, abstract, and non-objective. Another term we use is referent. In order to see how these terms work together, let's begin with the referent. A referent is something we see in the artwork that is recognizable from the natural world or the imaginative world. Looking at the title of a work of art may help us learn whether or not the artist used a referent. We can see that the painting on the right, called Flamingos, has the birds as a referent. If it was entitled Number 10, then there may or may not be a referent, and it would be hard to know just from the title. We can't rely on the title alone to know if the artist intends a referent. We have to look at the artwork itself. These examples use reference from the natural world: a dog, a couple on a beach, and a branch with leaves. We use the term referent when analyzing paintings, fine art prints, photographs, and sculptures. Even though these paintings are from my imagination, they have reference that are recognizable. The ducks are floating in a fantastic landscape, and the goat figure is thinking of the car she would like to have. Is it possible to see the same referent used in different subject matter? Actually, it is. Let's look at some examples of a tree that's used as a referent. Artwork that is representational always has a referent. We apply the term representation from the natural world to a wide range of realistic artwork. Here's an example of a photograph that is highly realistic and a collage that uses abstraction to manipulate reality. The referent of the tree is recognizable in both examples. Artwork that is from the artist's imagination must have some connection with the real world, otherwise we couldn't make sense of it. Even artwork that is based on fantasy, science fiction, or mythology has a referent. In this painting, the tree and the birds are recognizable reference, but the landscape is fanciful. Artists use abstraction to manipulate the referent by exaggerating features, deleting or minimizing details, or changing the form in some way. This can be used in a very subtle way, or abstraction can be quite radical, so that the entire artwork becomes highly abstracted. The tree image on the left does not have realistic details of the tree in the background. I used abstraction to modify the reference. The tree image on the right has been abstracted to such an extent that it is really just more of a symbol of a tree. Sometimes an artist wants to work with the elements and principles of design, such as line, color, texture, and shape, for their own sake, without using a referent. You might look at a non-objective work and see something real in it, but that may not be the artist's intention. Sometimes the term non-representational is also used to describe work that does not use a referent. Non-objective art gives a lot of freedom to the viewer to create their own interpretation of the artwork. When a viewer asks the artist, "What is it?" the artist often replies, "Well, what does it look like to you?" This is a recognition of the subjective nature of non-objective art. In these watercolors, I've had fun working with shapes and colors. I enjoy creating abstract and representational art. In this painting of the Northwest Coast, ask yourself these questions. Is there a referent? If so, is it easily recognizable? Is the referent painted in a realistic manner? Well, the referents are from the natural world, the tree, the grass, the water, and they're painted in a realistic manner, so they're consistent with the way we would expect to see them in the real world. So therefore, the subject matter is representational from the natural world. We can ask the same questions when we look at this watercolor of the shell. The references are from the real world, but the shell is floating. This is not realistic. So the details in the mountains are abstracted. Obviously, this is something from the artist's imagination. So we would say that this is representational from the imaginative world. You may find that sometimes the subject matter of a work of art seems to be somewhere between abstraction and representation. In that case, you simply need to describe how abstraction is used. In this painting, the references are recognizable. The ocean, the people, the dog, the hills. I have used abstraction to minimize details in the figures. In fact, everything has received this treatment, so that the scene has a soft appearance. The subject matter of this painting is representational from the natural world, but abstraction has been used to manipulate the reference and minimize the details. The colors, lines, and shapes in this painting create a design without a referent. I was interested in using a more intuitive approach without referring to anything recognizable. As a result, the subject matter is non-objective and open to interpretation by the viewer. You might see this image as a cave, a nest, or maybe it's expressing emotions such as struggle or hope or searching. As a non-objective work, it's open to different interpretations. What do you see? Remember, art with a referent is representational from the natural world or the imaginative world. And abstraction can be used to manipulate the referent in some way. Non-objective art does not have a referent because it uses the elements and principles of design to create an image or object for its own sake.
Subject is the literal, the visible image or the most obvious aspect in an artwork that serves as the foundation of the creation of an art. Subject matter answers the question, what? And to determine subject matter in a particular piece of art, ask yourself, what is actually depicted in this artwork? What is the artist trying to express to the world? What is the main idea that is represented in the artwork? That is the subject matter. Next is the types of visual arts. So we have representational or figurative art, abstract art, and non-representational or non-objective arts. So first is the representational or the figurative arts. It aims to represent the actual objects from the reality. Artworks that are based on images that can be found in the objective worlds or at least in artists' imaginations. If the artist begins with the subject of reality but the art departs significantly from the actual appearance of things, it is called abstract. Simply, it is any work of art that you can tell what it is. For examples, next is the non-representational or the non-objective art. Art that makes no reference to nature or the reality. It does not represent or depict a person, place, or thing in the natural world. The content of the work is its color, shapes, brushstrokes, size, scale, and in some cases, its process. If the artist is creating an abstract with no reference in reality, it is considered to be non-objective art. For examples, representational art represents the actual subjects from the reality. Although some of these forms are taking steps toward abstraction that takes subjects from reality but present them in a way that is different from the way they are viewed in our reality, they still fall under the category of the representation. Meaning, as long as the subject matter is nag-exist talaga sa realidad, kahit iba pa yung way kung paano linagay yung elements of art, as long as the subject matter is from the reality, magpo-fall pa rin siya sa representational art. Next is the non-representational art or the non-objective art, which is often mistaken for abstract art, although it is entirely different from it. Non-objective art takes nothing from reality. It is created purely for aesthetic reasons. Next is the ways of presenting subject matter in visual arts.
Form and content are terms that you hear often in almost any scholarly discussion of the arts. But what do they mean, and why are they so often paired up? At the most basic level, content can be defined as the subject of an artwork. In other words, what the artwork is about. Form is the means through which that subject is expressed. Another way to look at it is, content is what the artwork is about, form is how that meaning is presented to the viewer. The two terms are often paired because works of art need them both. Form and content are a team. They depend on one another. Content provides something to express. Form supplies the methods and techniques necessary for us to experience it. And form doesn't just allow us to see the subject, content. It lets us see that content in a very particular way. It lets the artist shape our particular experience and interpretation of that content. In the world of cinema, form is cinematic language. In other words, the tools and techniques that filmmakers use to convey meaning and mood to the viewer, such as lighting, camera angles, focal length, editing, moving camera, proxemics, mise en scène, and sound. In other words, the content of most of this DVD and textbook. If we consider the Juno scene analyzed in Chapter 1, the content is Juno in the waiting room. We could be more specific and say that the content is Juno thinking about fingernails and changing her mind. The form used to express that subject and meaning includes decor, the Dalian, juxtaposition, patterns, implied proximity, point of view, and sound. There are plenty of examples of the interplay between content and form on the short films disc that came with your textbook. This moment from Spam Coup is about the protagonist's elated anticipation of a year's supply of canned meat. The form director Steven Tushita uses to convey that meaning includes time-lapse photography.
All day long I was oozing with anticipation, thinking about the wonderful new recipes I would be feasting on in a mere 2 weeks.
And a series of artfully posed shots of Spam concoctions.
Spam cupcakes, Spam nachos, Spambalaya jambalaya.
In this scene from Andrew Lund's Snapshot, the content is memory, the photographer trying to recall a particular picture. The form is a progressive series of collages composited over the moving image. Memory is also the subject of Deborah Chow's The Hill, specifically a late-night conversation in which former lovers deconstruct a troubling incident in their shared past. Much of this content is conveyed through dialogue and performance.
Why are we here?
But director Deborah Chow uses a variety of formal techniques to craft our experience and interpretation of each character's conflicting versions of the same event. And finally, the content of Bartholomew's song is a factory worker's developing and ultimately consuming interest in music sparked by his discovery of a tape player. But the movie's deeper allegorical meaning would be lost if not for the director's use of form. The deliberately austere industrial set design, the Spartan costumes and makeup, the carefully balanced compositions, the sound design, and a series of meaningful juxtapositions transform this simple story into a metaphorical conflict between creativity and conformity.
Form refers to the artwork styles, techniques, media use, the development of the work, and its composition, or the characteristic manner of exercising elements used by an artist in creating art. In the subject matter, it answers the questions what, while in the form, it answers the question how the artist applies the elements of arts and the principles of design in an artwork. How the artists present the subject matter by means of chosen media, and how the artists use and employ their tools and materials in doing an artwork. Last is the content, which is the meaning of a work of art, the artist's intention. Meaning behind the word includes the connotative, symbolic, and suggested aspects of the image, the communication of ideas, feelings, and reactions connected to the subject. The subject matter answers the question what, while the form answers the questions how. Now the content answers the questions why. Why we create an art? Why do artists create art? For what? Meaning, the content referred to as the general intention or the general meaning of the piece of an art.
People usually
usually spend less than a minute looking at a single artwork. Most spend no more than 5 seconds. That was 5 seconds. Do you remember much of that painting? How would you describe it? Do you remember the details? It's absolutely fine to browse and wander through an art museum. But when you stop to spend 5 to 10 minutes with one artwork to discuss it with someone, it can change how you see, how you think, and how you appreciate that object. Let something catch your eye. It might be something you like. It might even be something you dislike. Stop to figure out what caught your eye. Start seeing. Seeing requires you to use your brain to direct your eye, to ask questions, and to process information. Take in a full view. You don't need to look at the label first. You don't really need that information right now. Just enjoy moving your eye around the artwork. Then pick a starting point. Here, maybe it's the center group. Why does your eye move there? Try to figure it out. That red of her scarf, it's the only red in the midst of green, blue, white, and gray. The group is almost, though not quite, in the center of the image. The sloping lines of the trees on either side and the diagonal line of the wall and the street lead me right to that group. I feel like I'm on the same street. It's probably not a picture of today if I look at what they're wearing, and there are no cars on the road. I think they're standing in the shadow, but of what? Trees, maybe? Or a building? It makes me think of the tower of a cathedral. It's a strong shadow, so the light must be bright. I want a closer look. If I step about 12 inches away and just look at the paint, the brush strokes, I can almost see the artist adding one dab of color on top of another. That gray isn't just gray, it's blue over the gray and green mixed with the blue. I even see a few dots of orange around their feet. And then maybe more orange up in the trees. And then again, up in the hillside. The white of the road is painted differently, with longer brush strokes. The faces aren't detailed, they're just blobs of color. How does the artist know where to put those blobs of color so that it looks like a face? Let's put it all back together again. If I back up, this painting looks really different from a distance than it does up close. The edges and shapes look so solid from here, but I now know that they're made up of small dots of many colors. It's similar to the painting to the left, with all those dabs of color, but it seems a little more controlled maybe. And it's similar to the painting to the right, with the same colors and a road, but different brush strokes. Now let's look at the label. So it's by Léon Porteau, a French artist, and it was painted in 1891. He was young when he died, only 30. And on the painting in the lower right, LP 91 So that's the artist's name and the year it was painted. I guess I never thought about how the landscape can be broken into these big shapes, or how many different colors can appear in the landscape. A green tree isn't just one shade of green, it's many shades of green, and the blue between the leaves of the sky. Maybe this makes me more observant of everything around me, even when I'm outside the museum. So, as you wander the museum, take time to stop and focus your attention on a single artwork, because it deserves more than 5 seconds.
Good day everyone, welcome to Contemporary Philippine Arts from the region. My name is Ronaldin T. Casanova. You can call me Ma'am Casanova. I've been teaching here at HUMSS for 3 years and this is my 4th year. I'm so